Hello and welcome to the Dyno Six-Pack Dynasty Football Podcast. I'm your host, JJ Schultz, and I'm joined by my good buddy, Keith Flemming today. How are you doing today, man?
What's going on, JJ? Doing well, man. I do feel a little bad for May the 6th because you got, like May 4th. May the 4th be with you.
Yeah.
May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, and then, it's just no fun to be the redheaded stepchild, right? And that's got to.
And you fall on a Monday too, so it's just
I'm saying, it's a bad pull.
Yeah, it is. So we're going to do our best to bring a little bit of positivity to it for that one. We got a fun show planned today. We haven't really got to talk. I think it's been before the draft since we recorded, especially, and since we even really had like a real deep football conversation. So I'm excited to get your opinion today. It just kind of worked out that a lot of the guys that you either like rooted for in college or root for in the players got drafted there. So it's just kind of a good time to bring you back on. So what we're going to do today, instead of talking about the guys at the top of the draft, your Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s, those guys, we're going to talk about more of the guys that are going to go at the back end of the first round, sometimes on the top end of the second round of your drafts. Obviously, you're talking about like a one quarterback lead. Most of these guys are probably going to go in that late first round, but super flex, some of these guys going to be second, but kind of that 1-2 range here. So we're going to kind of break down the landing spot and the dynasty outlook for a few of those guys. We're going to give our prediction for who we think is going to be the best running back out of this class. And then we'll wrap up with a little bit of quarterback talk before we get out of here. Before we hop into that, make sure you guys become all access members over at Fantasy Six Pack. Head over to fantasysixpack.net/plans. You're going to get access to all of our award-winning rankings. We have some awesome DFS and betting projection tools. You can win some money there. You're going to get custom advice for your leagues. You can hop into the Discord forum with us and get tag an analyst, and you'll get 3, 4, or 5 people in there hopping in to answer your fantasy questions that are tailored specifically to your league. One of the best bang for your buck you can get out there. Again, that's fantasysixpack.net/plans. All right, let's get into what we came here for now. So if you guys, were following this before we started, you guys saw the little thumbnail we had here of Lad McConkey, who has a little bit of a soft spot in Keith's heart here. He's been hyping him up well before the pre-draft process even started. He's kind of who brought him really to my attention when I first started diving into rookies back here December, January time. So looking at Lad McConkey, he landed with the Chargers. Finished last year with 30 catches for 478 yards and 2 touchdowns, which those overall numbers don't really jump off the page, but that doesn't really tell the full story here. So Keith, how do you feel about Lad with, I guess, just the general landing spot there with the Chargers, and then just kind of how are you viewing him in Dynasty moving forward here?
Well, I mean, you're well aware, and talk about feeling pressure, right? Because I know that I've probably bumped him up on all of your rankings and in your Dynasty teams and stuff from just, pushing this guy up for months. But I love Lad. You got to remember at UGA, he was hurt, missed a significant portion of his last year. And then also it's just tough for UGA guys to put up big stats. I mean, they're so loaded from an offensive standpoint. It's very balanced, and it's part of the reason why I love Brock Bowers, who we'll talk about later. But Lad still was able to make a huge impact. He was a big-time player in the biggest games. And what stands out is his route running ability. I thought that it was his route running ability that was helping him be so wide open all the time. Because, I mean, he consistently will juke a defender. And then there's so much separation then very quickly between him and the corner. And if you got a good QB, that's a mismatch. But then he ran a 4.39, and it's going, okay, well, maybe – he's just also an elite athlete. And let's be honest, white dudes don't normally get called elite athletes. They get knocked down for that.
Yeah.
Lad is the real deal. Like, people compare him to Cooper Kupp. Yeah, dude is telling you, he can move. And a fascinating story, if you don't know, his senior year, he was not heavily recruited. And up until the very last minute, when UGA shocked everybody by offering him a full ride, he was looking at going to a military school. And came into UGA, had an immediate impact, was actually a big part of that national championship team, obviously the second one. So I loved him pretty much no matter where he went, because I just think he is almost a prototypical perfect NFL wide receiver. Obviously not like the Justin Jefferson type guy, but and it's scary now because St. Brown's been so good, but the Amon-Ra St. Brown, like these guys that come in and they're just such good route runners. Devontae Smith is another one. They're just so smooth and so good. They catch everything. They put up numbers. I feel like that's what Lad is. And then he lined up inside. He lined up outside. This year they used him in motion so he can do whatever. So I would have been on him no matter what. And then he goes to the Chargers, right? And Herbert, since 2020, 65% of his receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. Everett, Guyton, Allen, Williams, Eckler, they're all gone. I mean, so he's going to get peppered like he just is. It looks like he's going to line up in the slot. We saw how much Keenan Allen would have these huge stat games from the I know it's a different offense, but still Herbert obviously feels good throwing to people coming out of the slot. And it would be different if Quentin Johnston was better last year. He was not. So I think there's a chance for him to come in and be the number one wide receiver, immediately, the number one target in this offense. So I actually have him there's no one touching Neighbors and Harrison, but I have him, if you're just talking about for redraft or best ball, and the guy I think is going to do the best for this season out of the rookie class, I have him third right now.
Yeah. I mean, I can see that. Like when you're talking about his fit, like he's going to line up some in the slot, but one of the things that I liked last year is on like passing downs or on like actual passing downs there where they threw the ball. He actually lined up more on the outside than he did in the slot by a good amount. And that kind of fits well. I think Quentin Johnston, if they're going to get him back on track, their best bet is kind of getting him in as like a big slot. And so the good part is that's not going to take McConkey off the field in those situations. He can kind of go on the outside and work those short intermediate routes. So I think it's a great fit. In our first rookie draft I guess you weren't in this league, but the first rookie draft we completed, I actually traded up it's a 10-team league, but he's fell to 203. So pick 13. Wow. So traded Pacheco, went up, got Lad McConkey, and then got a few extra receivers thrown in with him, like Michael Wilson and one other kind of throwing receiver in that range. So yeah, I'm all in on Lad this year. I like the landing spot. I think there's a good chance he's going to lead the team in targets this year. It's basically QJ and Joshua Palmer that are there that he's competing with. So I think he's from day one pretty much going to be the number one option there. So
it's really good in play action too, which we would assume they're going to do a lot more of that, a lot more running this year with Harbaugh. And that was really where McConkey had almost all of his big plays this year was in play action because he's so good at making that initial move. And if the safety bites, he burns the corner with Herbert's arm. I think people will be surprised. I think he's going to have some big play touchdowns this year as well.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm all in there. I think I have him as a fifth wide receiver in the class for Dynasty. But like he's kind of in a tier with 3 or 4 guys where like if you take him ahead of some of the guys we'll talk about later, Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, like I can't really knock you too much. Like it's a great fit right away. Keeping it with that Georgia theme here, let's kick it over to Brock Bowers, who I think the initial kind of reaction on draft day when he landed with the Raiders was kind of like a little bit of a confused one just because they just invested in Michael Mayer last year. It's one that as I've had time to marinate on it, the one was like, I like this landing spot. He's going to have a ton of opportunity right from the start to get out there. Like looking at what he did last year, 121 snaps on passing downs that he took in line, 148 from the slot. So he's going to move in. They're going to be able to get Michael Mayer and him on the field together. They're going to play different roles essentially. So it's one that as I kind of thought about it, I'm like, okay, he's going to have Devontae Adams on the outside. I actually think this is a pretty good landing spot for him to put up numbers right away and have a pretty featured role as one of the new big mismatches in the NFL.
Yeah, this is why I think you're very smart, and I love talking to you about this stuff. Is that was my reaction, and it was pretty immediate. Like there was obviously the shock of, well, wait a minute, they just took Mayer, and then you think about it, and it's going, okay, he played slot, he lined up outside some, they lined him up in the backfield, which I really think, if you look on short yard situation, they were so good lining him up as that fullback, handing him the ball, sometimes throwing it to him coming out of the backfield. They're drafting an offensive weapon. They're not drafting a tight end. They're drafting a guy that Jacoby Myers is gone. That is a lot of targets, receptions, and yards. And yes, Devontae Adams is still one of the most underrated, wide receivers in football. So, I mean, I understand he's there, but outside of that, you think Michael Myers or Mayer is going to target or, put up receiving yards and receptions of Bowers? I don't think so. I don't think any of their other receivers will. They don't really, if Zamir White is a running back, he's not really a pass catching back. I think this is brilliant. I like Gardner Minshew a lot, and I'm assuming that's where they're going to go. I can't see them going back with Aiden O'Connell. Maybe they do, but either way, Bowers was not really the deep threat that people think, in the sense that most of his plays were get the ball to him quickly, and then that is where he's elite. And I mean, I just can't wait, especially if they're lining him up at slot or on the outside. These safeties and corners are going to find out real quick. I hope you have some help coming, because if not, he is going to just run over you. Like I know they say he's a little undersized, and by the technical measurements, yes, he is. He plays so much bigger. And I just want to remind people, he just turned 21 years of age. He was a true 18-year-old freshman when he played Alabama in the SEC championship his freshman year and had over 100 yards and was the biggest reason that the Dogs got into the national championship. Obviously, they went on to win that game as well. They lost the SEC championship. They came back and won the national championship game. And that class, too. Look at Adonai Mitchell, Pickens, Washington. There was all these James Cook, all these great players. Bowers, by far, most receptions on the team, most receiving yards, most touchdowns. He was an 18-year-old freshman.
Yeah.
This guy is super special. And I think the Raiders got a steal where they did, because I just think he is the perfect offensive weapon in modern football, because he does so much of what Travis Kelce does, but he is so much tougher to bring to the ground and more athletic. And I know that's saying something, but you watch him run with the football. He looks like a running back. He does not look like a tight end or a wide receiver. He catches everything. He really did a good job last year of finding space, something Kelce does so well, right, where he's not actually even running the route that he was told to run. He just immediately reads the defense and goes to the open space and catches a pass. I'm so excited for Bowers, and it doesn't scare me at all. I still think he's a top 5 tight end this year, and I think within 2-3 years, he is where Travis Kelce was, where it's like, okay, Brock Bowers is the number 1 tight end in fantasy, and then everybody else is just a little bit below.
Yeah. I almost didn't include him because I think in tight end premium leagues, he goes ahead of Dunze and a lot. I've seen him go as high as top 5 in tight end premium leagues that we've drafted already. But yeah, I love.
He should, in my opinion. Like, I think if you're looking at somebody that, I'd be shocked if he's not really good. And I think it's a great landing spot because, again, there's not a lot of mouths to feed. Like, I know Devontae Adams will get a big, share, but outside of that, who else you really throwing it to?
Somebody else has to do something that has to be him. I mean, and you're talking about playing in that Georgia offense where they spread it out so much. Like, just for comparison, like Lad McConkey, 478 yards, 2 touchdowns that last year. Bowers, who I remember I'd also kind of missed a little bit of time.
He missed 4 games, basically.
Still put up 717 yards and 6 touchdowns. Like, put up 250 more yards and 4 more scores than Lad McConkey, who we're talking about as a guy that could come in day one and be the top 36 wide receiver for fantasy options there. Just kind of lets you know what kind of talent we're talking about with Brock Bowers here.
And he's more dangerous in the slot or as a receiver, even though he's a good blocker. But I just mean linebackers and stuff physically can handle him more. You're talking about safeties and corners. He's going to be so much stronger than those guys.
He's going to overpower all of them.
Yep.
So moving on to our next guy here, and he's probably one of the guys that was one of the biggest winners of the guys we'll talk about in the draft today, or the real NFL draft, that is, and that's Keon Coleman out in Buffalo. The stars kind of aligned for him perfect where Stephon Diggs leaves, so there's a ton of targets open there. You look at the depth chart outside of Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir can play a nice role, but he's not going to be the number 1 guy there. Enter Keon Coleman. He has a chance to kind of be Josh Allen's number 1 option as a wide receiver from day one, outside of Dalton Kincaid. Looking at what he did last year, had 50 catches for 658 yards, 11 touchdowns. So we can definitely get it done in the end zone. We saw that first game of the year. We had 3 touchdowns against LSU. What type of threat he can be in the end zone there. Can play a little bit everywhere. Lined up 280 snaps out wide, played 120 of them out of the slot. So they're going to be able to move him around and create those mismatches similar to what they're going to be able to do with Dalton Kincaid. So I see the vision there. He's a guy that I definitely moved up kind of into the same tier with these guys and even up ahead of a few of these guys here. But before I get too far into that, like, how do you feel about Keon Coleman? What were kind of your instant takeaways after the draft, and how are you kind of looking at him?
A little surprised, honestly, that this was the guy that they took. Mm-hmm. But I mean, from a dynasty standpoint, I can understand if you have him as like your 3rd or 4th highest wide receiver, because Diggs is gone. Yeah. I mean, Kincaid's got, I'm a big Shakir guy, and I still am, but
State, baby.
The number 1 wide receiver, though, spot is open. And I mean, they tried to find it, they want this kind of big play guy, because even Diggs in Buffalo was not really the take the top off of it. My only concern with it is it felt like last year with Brady calling the plays, this offense changed.
Yeah.
It got more efficient and better, if we're being honest. And what it was Josh Allen not taking a lot of chances and throwing it, taking what was there with these really good weapons, especially in small space. I'm talking about James Cook, Shakir, Kincaid. Now, I think there's a plenty of room for Coleman to have these chunk plays, because, again, you're going to, kind of punch, and then just throw it over the top. But I think we kind of saw this offense. I think they're modeling after what Kansas City did the last 2 years. Yeah. I think they looked at what KC did, and it's like, look, were they as explosive? Obviously not. You didn't have Tyreek Hill, but they were arguably more efficient. They definitely were the first year. It was like one of the most efficient years for the Chiefs offense with Mahomes. Mm-hmm. And it was just basically letting Mahomes be great, getting 5 yards here, 8 yards there. And with Allen's running ability as well, I do wonder like how big of a season he's going to have this year. So for like redraft and best ball, I would just be careful.
Mm-hmm.
But for dynasty, again, like if you believe in him, I mean, this is as good of an opportunity as a wide receiver can ask for.
Yeah, I mean, immediate opportunity right there from day one. They're going to need somebody else to go up and to be a threat in the red zone area. I think it's a good spot for Keon Coleman. It's funny. I kind of like following him throughout the draft season. Right at the start of it, it seemed like he was really high as kind of like the film and the analytics people really dug into it. Like it seemed like he kind of dropped a little bit, and then that draft landing spot bumped him right back up there. So I could see a situation where he ends up being overdrafted now. But for most of the drafts I've seen, he's slid kind of to like that top of the second round where he's going 201, 202. And at that point, I think that's the risk is baked in at that point.
Real value. Like, I mean, let's be honest. Like if he ends up being a home run, now you're talking about like, let's go. And he's such a better and nicer guy than Stephon Diggs. So, I mean, if you watch Bill's game, Diggs just constantly is on the sideline screaming. And by the way, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, throw me the ball as he's throwing like 10 to 12 times a game. I never understood that. And I just think with Coleman, again, there's a lot to be said with camaraderie and all that stuff. And he seems to be a very likable guy. I think there's a chance Buffalo could be really good offensively this next year. And people are, thinking it's the opposite when it's, again, Brady really kind of, got the most out of those weapons. And now you've added another good piece. It's another year of Allen running that offense. I think they may be a surprising, like, juggernaut offense team. Somebody you want to get as many players as possible for, next year's draft.
Yeah, absolutely there. Let's kick it over to the next guy here. And this is the guy that out of every receiver we're going to talk about today, the one that I am the highest on, he is my wide receiver 4 in this class. And that is Xavier Worthy of the Chiefs. Looking at what he did last year, 75 catches, broke the 1,000-yard mark with 1,014 yards, had 5 receiving touchdowns. Played more outside than I thought he was going to be when I first kind of dug into the stats. Like he ended up taking 294 snaps out wide and only 196 out of the slot. So moved around, played a little bit everywhere. But I was a little bit surprised just when I remember watching on tape, it seemed like a lot of the stuff he was kind of winning from the inside. But obviously that's not the case. He can do a little bit of everything there. I know the instant takeaway for a lot of people is, it's just the next Chiefs wide receiver. Everyone's going to hype him up. But this isn't the receivers we're talking about before. Like this is going to be closer to the Rashee Rice level receiver than it is the MVSs and the guys that they've invested heavily in before that. Where do you come in on Worthy compared to the rest of the guys we've talked about, and how are you kind of valuing him versus, the Chiefs' history at drafting receiver here at this position?
All right, let me say this because he scares me. Like he really does. I mean, I know that, again, you can't compare him to other receivers, but I'm somebody that believes in trends, right? And the Chiefs have proven sometimes they don't do the best job of evaluating wide receivers.
Outside of one time, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's my first concern. The other is just these guys that are this fast historically also don't end up being very good. Having said that, though, I mean, if I'm in a dynasty league, I mean, it's redraft best balls. I've already taken them this year. I mean, nobody will ever be able to be Tyreek Hill. We know that. But this is by far like as close as you can get to in the sense of putting pressure on a defense and, allowing the rest of the offense to do what it did in Kansas City that was so great, right? Because Hill was almost always running routes that would take 2-3 defenders because you knew that he had the speed and athleticism with Mahomes' ability to throw it down the field and accurate. Touchdown was coming if you were caught slipping. And that just opened up everything else for Kelsey and all those other guys. And they've missed that the last 2 years. Like, I mean, I know that you got Scantling, who he's a speedster. He can't catch the ball, though. That's the issue. If you can't catch the ball, that's a problem. Teams are like, I'm not that really worried if you get by me. So, I mean, I'm interested, honestly. And at this point, I'm selfishly rooting that Worthy's not any good because, I mean, I've said this before. Come on. If the Chiefs won 2 Super Bowls the last 2 years with the offensive weapons they had, and now you start to look at it and it's like, oh, God, they're retooling this offensive side of the ball where it's shored up the offensive line a little bit. Got a 6'6" tight end. They still got Kelsey coming back. It's like Rice may not be suspended this year. Yeah, it's like, Jesus, can these guys – I mean, they've had enough, okay? We don't need to keep giving the Chiefs wins. But if this guy is what they drafted, and there's a very good chance he is, like I'll admit the more tape I watched on him, he's more than just a burner. Like he's a really good receiver. He's got good hands. He runs good routes. And then on top of that, he's, a super freak athlete. Yeah. So I think that, for Dynasty, the sky's the limit. He's another one, though, I would be a little cautious this season, just because especially if Rice ends up not missing any time, he's probably going to be the third weapon. And then it's touchdown dependent if he's going to live up to probably where he's going in drafts.
One of the things I think is going to be interesting to follow just over the next few years is kind of that Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman connection. Because, I mean, right, wrong, or indifferent, the Bills, obviously Coleman was their guy. They could have had him there, but they decided to trade back. They had a good thought he would still get there into the 201, so they took him there. So imagine now, if Xavier Worthy ends up being incredible, the story is, oh man, the Bills gave the Chiefs some more help, let him go. But if it comes up the other way where it's like, oh, they look like geniuses, they traded back, they're like Danny Ainge, they traded back and still got.
Ask the Eagles if they would like to have Justin Jefferson, right? Like, right, you know what I mean? Like they let the Vikings come up. I mean, it just. Yeah. I'm with you because I thought he would make even more sense with Buffalo than Kansas City, but because it just looked like Chiefs of offense again had evolved and like they were totally different. But I understand that Mahomes is like, look, when you have it's like Steph Curry in the NBA. When you have somebody with that kind of range or that kind of speed, the defense is constantly on skates, and Mahomes is so good that just frees so much else up. So I don't even know if it matters if he's great, if he's just good at that speed and can, make those big plays that Tyreek used to, he's going to kind of be worth it for this Chiefs offense either way.
Yeah, it's taking a little pressure off of Kelsey. It's going to affect everything around him if he's able to do just that little bit there. Moving over to our next guy here, Brian Thomas Jr. He was the one that was kind of the consensus, I feel like, wide receiver for most people going into the draft. For me, dropped him one spot after landing with the Jaguars there. Played pretty much exclusively on the outside, like over 80% of his snaps last year came on the outside versus in the slot. Big red zone threat, scored a ton of touchdowns. That's going to be his calling card there. And he's one of those that when it first got drafted there, I didn't love it, but since the days have kind of gone by, it's cleared out there. They got rid of Zay Jones there. It's basically Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk he's competing with targets for. There's a chance that he could develop a pretty big role for the Jaguars right away. I'm a little nervous, man. Like I don't know what it is. It's just kind of a little bit of a gut feeling where I don't have like
is it Tilo or is it him? That's my question.
Yeah, and maybe it's just the whole situation there, and maybe I should stop just helmet scouting and get that out and just look at the player. But for whatever reason, this gut feeling, I'm a little bit lower on Thomas Jr. Like I've dropped him down, and I could even see a world where on the clock, I'm forced to make that decision. I could see myself taking Coleman over Thomas at this point just because of that Buffalo upside. So talk to me here. How are you looking at Brian Thomas Jr. and just kind of how are you viewing him for Dynasty?
So I flip-flopped, right? Because I actually was low on him. And I only mean that in like wide receiver rankings overall. I think I had him like 8 or 9, and most people did have him at like 4. But I think this is a perfect landing spot. Like this is, and not only is it a perfect landing spot, he is such a good wide receiver for Trevor Lawrence. If you look at who Lawrence has excelled with, I mean, I know Kirk has done a lot of damage, but it's been the big guys. Yeah, it's like, Zay Jones, Evan, like these big targets. That's who he's most efficient throwing the ball to. He's gaining the most yardage per pass attempt. I think most of his touchdowns have came to those guys. And I have a really good friend who, I mean, he watches, a ton of college football, a ton of NFL, Auburn fan. He said that the best player he saw this entire year was without a doubt Brian Thomas Jr. Like that he was just like, no matter what we did, we could not stop him. And that's on a team with Malik Neighbors. So I think this is like a match made in heaven. I still believe in Trevor Lawrence's talent.
Yeah.
I like the coaching staff there. I think that people are just putting a little too much on T-Law that's not extremely fair because the first year we know was a shit show.
Yeah.
And then he had a second year, right?
Good. Yeah.
Pretty good. And then last year, he was injured. It just, I still think he's that guy. And I like that he's with Peterson. He's proven that he's been able to work with QBs and stuff. And I kind of like the offensive weapons that they have around now. Because again, not that I believe in Gabe Davis, because I could never say that again. I'm hopeful, though, that we will see some of the Gabe Davis actually with Lawrence that we kept predicting in Buffalo, because T-Law is more of a true guy who can take advantage of a receiver with Gabe Davis' skill set to where Allen, not so much. He's a lot better on those touch throws and just throwing deeper down the field in general. So I'm kind of high on the Jags, man. I think they're going to win the AFC South this year. Everybody's going to be picking the Texans, and I actually like T-Law to have the bounce back. And then the question is C.J. Stroud or Trevor Lawrence the better AFC South quarterback moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, a few small things bounce a different way for T-Law. His numbers look a lot different from what we're talking about right now. So let's put it in perspective here. So Brian Thomas, you're on the clock right now, and we'll say every receiver we've talked about this far is on the board right now. Are you going Ladd? You taking Brian Thomas? We'll get rid of Bowers. He's gone. Tight end premium. He's gone. You're looking at just the receivers here. Where are you drafting Brian Thomas among Worthy, Coleman, and Ladd?
I would probably have to go Ladd just because he's been my guy, and I would be so upset, say, if Ladd ends up being like Cooper Kupp 2.0, right? And I end up, missing on him. But I really like him, and I'd have him just behind him. And I would have him ahead of Worthy and Coleman because again, Rice and Kelsey in Kansas City. Yeah. And in Buffalo, I know, Schultz and Shakir doesn't sound, but when you add Cook, there is a lot of mouths to feed in the passing because James Cook caught a lot of passes as well last year.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's about right. Yeah. Moving it over here. So if we're talking about how Keon Coleman had a little bit of a drop in the pre-draft process and then jumped up at the draft, Adonai Mitchell had the opposite of that. Up before the draft, I think I saw Vegas set his line as high as 17.5 at one point, and then he drops clear down in the second. So Adonai Mitchell lands with the Colts. So all in all, it ended up being a pretty good spot. He can come in and play a good complimentary role right away. Look at what he did last year. Had 845 yards and 11 touchdowns and 55 catches. So can play that red zone threat. However, the slide in the draft capital from what we expected, landing a spot where they just paid Michael Pittman Jr., who's going to be the number one option there. Definitely feels like overall he's kind of settled in as more of a second round pick in super flex leagues, especially, and even some of the one quarterback leagues. He may be the last guy taken out of this group, if not some of the guys that we're not even going to talk about going ahead of him. So how are you looking at Adonai Mitchell as it stands now?
I think it's a good landing spot for him. The question with Mitchell for me is, what do you think about Anthony Richardson? Because if you're someone so again, if you're high on him, especially from the throwing perspective, if you believe both he can be an efficient fantasy running quarterback and throwing quarterback, I think AD Mitchell is the steal of dynasty draft boards that I've seen right now by far. Because let's be honest, Pierce is just not it. I mean, Pierce is not. I would be shocked if he is not on the field. They run a ton of 3 receiver sets. Everybody, is talking about Josh Downs. No offense, Josh Downs is not the wide receiver that AD Mitchell is. And I'm not positive that AD Mitchell won't get into Downs slot, snaps as well. Pittman lines up at the slot there. I think all 3 of those guys are going to end up lining up there. They're going to move him around. And, I didn't get to see him as much at Texas, obviously, because he left Georgia, screw him. But when he was at Georgia, he was that gamer, man. He caught arguably the biggest touchdown pass in the history of UGA football, or at least for my lifetime. And I think that it's one of these deals. We see it every few years with Warren Sapp, right? And Larry Tunzel. And it's some stupid bullshit makes them drop in draft boards, right? To where you get a guy 20, 30 picks after you should have for just some stupid, either decision that they made. And again, these are kids. They're going to do stupid things. Or in his case, it's a medical condition. And I promise you, the NFL organization is going to make sure his blood sugar is perfect at all the time. And from all reports, when that is correct, he's one of the coolest dudes in the world. He did something really cool for the city that I went to school, Valdosta, the year that they won the national championship. Going to read books at book clubs and stuff. I mean, and then on top of that, he's a really good player. I think if you're big on Richardson, which I'm with you, I think Richardson's going to be really good. This offense, man, you got Pittman, but he has a chance to be that number 2 receiver, I feel right away, because it's not like they have a tight end that you love is going to catch a bunch of balls. Jonathan Taylor's not really a receiving back. They, now we don't have Moss coming back who caught a bunch of balls last year. I just think there's a bigger share for him, and I'm really high on his talent, especially where they got him in the draft.
Yeah, if he slides to the second round, I'm snapping him up pretty much every single time there. So switching gears a little bit over to the quarterback position, let's talk about Bo Nix here at the Broncos. And he's a guy that I feel like in past years, I would have been stubborn and I would have kind of held to my pre-draft notions where just for the longest time, I just based off what we've seen from past drafts, I did not think he was a first rounder. I thought it was questionable if he was going to go in the second round. I thought just kind of from what we've seen traditionally, that age, that profile, I thought he was going to go closer to like that mid-second to third round. But obviously the NFL has spoken, and it sounds like they're not the only team, the Broncos, that were high on him. It sounds like they may have been the highest. They probably could have traded back a little bit, still got him. But I mean, he's Sean Payton's guy now. Like you look at like what Drew Brees did really well. Like Bo Nix can do a little bit of that. They're kind of getting some of his receivers in there around him. Got his buddy Troy Franklin in there. Marvin Mims was the guy that Sean Payton picked, I believe, second round as well last year. They got rid of Jerry Jeudy. So they're kind of getting that offense tailor-made. So he's the guy, past years I'd have probably held strong, but he's a fade. Just get rid of him. But I've moved him inside my top 10 for Superflex League now. I feel like it's the upside for fantasy is too much to ignore, especially now that we've seen it's not like the best apples comparison, but like a skill set like Brock Purdy thrive in fantasy. We've seen the blueprint work now. So I've kind of adjusted and I've came around and okay, I was a little bit of a hater on Bo Nix. I was wrong. I think he's a top 10 super flex pick now. Like, how are you looking at him now?
I would have him in that area. I don't know if I'd have him top 10 just because I really like a lot of these receivers in this class. And obviously Bowers is going to be way up there for me. Yeah. But it is like, I think the biggest winner in this draft among the QBs by far is Bo Nix, because to your point, like it sounds disrespectful now because Drew Brees has had the career he has, right? Mm-hmm. And he's a Hall of Famer, great, like one of the all-time great QBs. But a lot of the same knocks that we're saying about Bo Nix were said about Drew Brees, not only before he was drafted, but when he signed with the Saints. People were making, like, well, he can't really throw the ball down the field. He's small. And Nix is, 45 years old. So he's got experience.
Exactly.
And it would not surprise me if he comes in and he's pretty good. What scares me, and I'll go ahead and tell you more than anything, it's not even so much Nix's talent, because we kind of know what that is. It's, has Sean Payton lost his fastball? That is my biggest concern, because if Sean Payton is not the offensive mind that he was in New Orleans, this is going to look real bad. And because I think Nix is going to need an offensive play caller, to your point, putting him in very good positions, right? What did they do at Oregon? He's very good at reading the field really quickly. Yeah, and get rid of that ball. You know what I mean? And that's a little harder to do in the NFL if you don't have a really good play caller, because there's so many freaking good athletes on the field, right? Like there's going to be pressure quickly. You're not going to get the separation. So that's my honest biggest concern moving forward. But I'm with you. Nix was somebody that I couldn't stand during draft process. I saw him at the Senior Bowl, and I was like, he looked pretty good actually in the red zone drills, which makes sense, right? Because a lot of short, quick passing. But when they were doing full field stuff, he looked horrible. Yep. But I do like where he landed, and I love that they, have Franklin with him, which I think that's a big deal, to have a wide receiver and a QB that played together, especially when it looks like they're both going to play, if not immediately, during their first year together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, both come in with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. I mean, you look at what he did in college, that 45 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, like even in one of the more friendly offenses, like that's pretty incredible numbers. Like that's something you got to take note of there. So yeah, I'm with you there. I've moved him up. I think I have him number 10 in super flex right now. And it's just one of those quarterbacks, if they're sitting there at the end of the first and can realistically turn into a guy that's a top 20 consistent.
Yeah, especially if you need a QB, right? Like if you have say one definite starter and then one guy, it's like, man, you have like a Daniel Jones or something. It's just, you're just holding on for dear life. Yeah, I would take him in a heartbeat.
It's great value at this point this year, especially when you slide in that part. So kicking gears over to running backs just for a real second here. Who do you have? Who do you think is going to be the number one running back in this class when it's all said and done?
I don't think it's close. It's Jonathan Brooks. Okay. Love that he went to Carolina.
Yep.
I'm a Bryce truther, and actually I don't even know if a truther was the right word. I think it's unfair the way we've hammered him. A lot of this stuff was said about Trevor Lawrence when he went through the just awful situation with Urban Meyer his first year, and he looked awful. If you actually look, Trevor's last few games, similar to Bryce Young's, were his best games.
Yeah.
He and again, I know he wasn't setting the world on fire, but he got better, which is what's most important. And let's be honest. I mean, come on, Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo, like Hayden Hurst. I love Chuba Hubbard, but Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, not exactly, fair when you're coming, especially from a place like Alabama, where he had some of the best wide receivers and running backs and offensive linemen and everything. I like what Carolina's done in free agency and in the draft. And I just think that means good news for Brooks, who, if you look at it from his numbers in college and then like the athletic measurables, he's in that class with Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Bijan. There's only like 8 guys, I think, since 2012. And almost all of them have been really good at the NFL level. So I like him being at that. I like the fact that he's going to split carries with Hubbard. I think that'll mean they won't run him into the ground. And we saw he's a big play machine. So I think that it's a great fit for him. I think he's by far the best back in this class. The other 2 guys I just mentioned is I love both Floyd and Cohen and the situations they're in, where they're not asked for a lot, but they're on good teams with great play callers, and they're an injury or just their coaches deciding, you know what, I actually think this back is better, because they've both proven they'll swap running backs at the drop of a dime, that they could be, that top guy. And they're guys I really like where they're going in dynasty rookie drafts. I think they're undervalued right now because people are worried about Kyron Williams. I get that. Like, I understand, carries, but it's also like both those teams are going to share the rock. I don't think the Rams want to put, what was it, like a 95% snap count on Kyron Williams, where he missed 6 games, right? And he's not going to. I mean, not very many backs can.
Yeah, I'm with you on Brooks. I think Brooks is the answer here. If I had to highlight one other guy, it'd be Trey Benson. Obviously landed in the immediate. He still has James Conner ahead of him, who was productive when he's on the field, but he is another guy that struggled to stay upright. But look at what he did last year: 905 yards, 14 touchdowns, added another 20 catches. So he's not like a nothing in the passing game. So there's a spot for him to carve out a role right away. And I think there's a good chance that at this point that Benson may just be flat out better than James Cook. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Be careful, JJ. We've been saying that about James Conner now for 4 or 5. He's like the Mike Evans of running backs. For every year, I'm just throwing dirt on him, and he's like, I have another 1,000-yard, 10 touchdown season. Mm-hmm. Get him dirt cheap too.
He's the other guy, just being the fact that there's a chance that, and especially years 2, 3, 4, being
I'm with you.
With Kyler and Marvin Harrison Jr. I think there's a world where he could end up being the best.
McBride. I like a lot. I like Wilson. I like a lot of their weapons. I really do. Yeah.
So yeah, he's the other guy I'd mention here. But yeah, I'm with you. I do believe Brooks is going to do that. Be the best running back here. We'll do one more quick kind of debate here before we close it out with a little bit of Michael Penix talk here.
I appreciate you waiting to the end of
McCarthy, Drake Maye. Who are you taking for dynasty here? I feel like anymore, I put them in the same tier together, and I feel like your team build could kind of sway you one way or the other, but I'm curious how you feel. McCarthy, Maye, you're on the clock. You need a quarterback for your dynasty team. Who are you taking?
I feel like it's not close. I know this is probably a hot take, but I think it's McCarthy.
Okay.
I mean, you're telling me with one, I get Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, and you're telling me with the other, which New England receiver are you counting on?
Jalen Polk, baby. That's my guy here.
All right. Well, good luck with that. To me, you look, Minnesota, again, very good offensive-minded coach. People underrate Kevin O'Connell. Again, from that McVay coaching tree, we've seen how much they throw the football, which that's good for fantasy quarterbacks as well. I get the upside of Maye, and if you're talking about probably just from strictly a talent perspective, he's better.
I agree.
But New England is at least 2-3 years away. And I mean at least, and they may not have one legit weapon that he's going to have in 2-3 years on that roster right now. Mm-hmm. So if you're telling me the other guys got Jefferson and Jordan Addison, and oh, by the way, TJ Hawkinson, and, just all kinds of stuff, I'm going to take McCarthy. And also, again, that division, Detroit and Green Bay, they both give up a good bit of passing yards. At least they did last year. That's always good. That's 4 extra games to where, again, that AFC East, I think those defenses are going to be pretty good. I think it's McCarthy, and it's not really close. Unless you're just a big Maye believer, I think it's pretty risky.
So I actually agree with you. I had them tiered together, but I did move McCarthy ahead for a lot of the reasons that you're saying. Like, I think that if I'm drafting a real NFL team, I'm still definitely taking Drake Maye. I think short-term upside, but we're playing fantasy football here. We need guys that are going to put up points. I mean, look at what Kirk Cousins did the last 5 years throwing to those guys. I mean,
forget that. Look what Nick Mullins did last year with those guys. He will be a ton of money in DFS down the stretch, throwing for 300+ yards, 3-4 touchdowns. So, I mean, to me, it's, again, if Jefferson if you hear, in the next few weeks that Jefferson's not happy or that, he's wanting to leave, but it's kind of quieted, right? Like, it kind of seems like, and he's always said he wants to stay in Minnesota. I think he's happy with this pick. So if you're getting Addison and Jefferson for a minimum of 4 more years, I'm going to take that QB all day.
Yep, I'm with you. So I have them tiered together. I have McCarthy 1 spot ahead. I think the one thing I would say strategy-wise is if I'm just starting off a rebuild and I'm in the day one, I think at this point now McCarthy's going to move ahead of Maye in ADP. So I'm going to trade back a spot or two, pick up an extra pick down the road. And I'm going to take Maye and just play the long game. But if I'm, if I'm one of those teams that's picking 105, 106, and like I earned that pick to where like I'm just outside the playoffs and I need that boost right now, like I think McCarthy's probably the logical way to go there because he's going to be able to ride away from day one, have a better infrastructure to.
I actually think he is more of a fair comparison that you're making to Purdy. Like I actually see a lot of similarities in McCarthy and Purdy. We're good offense, a lot of great weapons around them. Smart. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Smart play call. I think that they're going to, put him in a very good situation to look really good, especially if he's accurate like he was in college, and that was kind of what's helped Purdy so much.
Yeah, it's one of those got to adjust. Like last year, I held strong in my belief. I was like, nah, Stroud's the dude. But like in this one, like it's enough where the landing spots are unequal enough that I think McCarthy is the way you kind of got to go there in most situations. And then let's round it out here with the most what the F pick of this entire draft here. Michael Penix Jr. to the Falcons. So as our resident Falcon fan here on the show, man, what the hell? like this. What,
don't you wish I knew? 40 years or getting into 40 years of fandom, and it's just the thing I'm most tired of is just Falcons fans are loyal. I know, we catch a lot of grief and a lot of flack, and what bothers me is it's not anything the fan base is doing. It's our team blowing leads, our front office doing stupids, our coaches being like, you know what, we spent a top 8 pick on this guy and passed on a generational guy in the middle line, but we're not going to give him the ball. We don't. That's not what we're going to do. They just always do the questionable thing, and I have to give them credit that if Penix ends up being good for 5 to 7, 5 to 8 years, even if it's 2-3 years down the line, ultimately they're going to be right. Like they just are, because if you can get your quarterback, you kind of have to in this league, especially if they're. And I'm talking about like good, like a top 10, top 12 quarterback. But it just doesn't make a lot of sense when you spend $150 million and then you go get Penix. I've been trying to talk myself into that. Well, they watched Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ridder, and Taylor Heineke the last 2 seasons, and like the owner and the front office were like, never again. We're never again being in that situation where we have nobody. And so, granted, even though you put so much money in Cousins, you're basically doubling down, right? To where if the injury doesn't recover right or he gets hurt, you have a good backup plan. And as long as they really like Penix, again, ultimately they're going to be right. But we couldn't at least traded with Minnesota and picked up something extra and let them go get McCarthy at 8 and then take Penix at 11. Like that's the part that really frustrated me was we didn't even move back to take a guy that nobody would have taken at 8. Nobody in like a million years.
Betting against this kind of type thing.
Exactly. Like it's just so dumb, but this is what this franchise does. Now, having said that, I love Penix, and like this situation for me is a dream because if Cousins ends up struggling or whatever, I do think that we have a legit backup. The concern I have is that who's the most popular player on every NFL team? It's the backup quarterback. That's who all the fans are always clamoring for anyway. And in Atlanta, I just know the first bag, it could be a bad quarter Cousins has. People are going to be wanting Penix. And then the other thing that scares me, it's a white and black quarterback, which in Atlanta, that's always super complicated and usually going to get ugly in a bunch of ways that nobody wants to see. I just hope it all works out. I'm very excited about the offense, though. That's the one good thing is like I'm been touting Pitts and London and Bijan. I feel even better about that, moving forward, because it's like not only do we have Cousins, we got Penix. So we're kind of good even if an injury happens. The problem is how many games are we going to lose like 35, 31, 38, 35, because yet again, we still don't have a pass rusher.
Right. It makes sense. I mean, so looking at it from like a dynasty league perspective, I feel like I have him kind of like ranked in like the mid-second for Superflex leagues right now. Like I'm kind of just looking at it as he's a 2026 first round pick right now. Like would you rather have mid-second or a 2026 first? Because you may have to wait till then, but at that point, you're going to have a top 10 quarterback who he may not have Pitts on the roster still at that point, but he should still have London. He's still going to have Bijan. They're going to have one of the better offensive lines. So, I mean, like, it's a pretty good situation. You just kind of got to be patient. And I think now that we've seen a case recently with Jordan Love, I feel like people can kind of vision like, okay, that's not just like a once in a million thing. Like, there's an actual path for this to happening.
In that system particularly. Because, right, like, this is the Rams coaching tree, which is the same as the Packers coaching tree. Like, and I kept thinking, like, Penix, actually, I thought the Rams were going to be the ones.
Yeah.
That were going to get Penix. I just felt like he would be just the perfect next guy for Stafford, right? Like, where you go from one guy, right, who can just flat out sling it and make any throw you want to another one. Not a lot younger, because, again, Penix is a little bit older, but younger version. And then, of course, again, Falcon's going to Falcon. We're the ones that pick it. I was shocked. Like, I really was. We were doing a live thing, draft thing on Fantasy and Frames. And Jorge had joked with me earlier. He's like, I know you get sometimes frustrated with, the Falcons. You don't have to come on if you were. I know last year, because, like, I was legit, like, I'm sure if you've seen the video, like, livid last year when we passed on Carter. And I was like, no, man, they're not. I was like, we're going to get whatever defender we want in the draft. They're going to take the layup, like, whether it be a corner, dude, we got this. And then I heard, I think it was Nate was like, no way. And I just immediately knew, oh, my God, what did we do? And even trying to figure it out, Penix was like the last thought in my mind until I saw it.
Yeah, I do like a Zoom with a couple of buddies, and this year their stream was about 10 seconds ahead of mine. And so, like, I got like about 10 seconds of them just being like just shock and awe. Where I'm like, who was it? Who was it? Who was it? And then, like, Penix just, man, it's crazy. Like, I like the fit. It's just very curious after the offseason. And, like, I don't know, a lot of people were like, oh, they didn't tell Kirk that they were going to make the pick. Like, I don't think that matters, because I don't think they knew for sure that he was going to be there. It seems like in their mind, they were
getting 150 guaranteed. Like,
he'll be all right. I don't think that's that big of a deal. And, like, in their minds, like, the one thing that I read is they said after they watched him run at like 4 or 5.40, they're like, oh, he's not going to make it to the second round. So maybe they thought that he wasn't going to be there if they moved back. But, like, it's just, I love the drama that when it's not the Cowboys, and so I love that from day one there's already like a storyline to follow that's going to distract.
We're definitely drama.
Pulling our players and not signing them to extensions and letting everybody else get signed first and just driving up their price higher and higher and higher for when we finally do. But that's a story for him.
And my issue is if they would have taken Penix at 8, and I said this in the moment, and then it couldn't have been that expensive. Traded up to get Dallas Turner. Like, there was 3 tackles, and the best corner in the draft didn't go until the 24th pick.
So far.
And I'm like, why did we not just go ahead and bet on ourselves? Because we doubled down on offense, obviously saying we're going to make sure we're really good on the offensive side of the ball this year. Well, hopefully that means you're going to compete. Like, let's go get a difference maker, because we needed both a corner and a pass rusher. And, I mean, especially like Turner, the Vikings went and did it, right? And I'm just like,
a lot to get
Jesus, like, that made so much sense. Like, they got McCarthy and then, went up and got him. I loved what they did there.
Yeah, they had a pretty good draft, at least on paper, for sure. But, man, that wraps it all up, man. I appreciate you stopping by to get caught back up off the draft here. Obviously it hasn't really slowed down too much for you. So where can the people find you? What all content are you pumping out right now? And what do you have on the horizon?
So we're doing still doing weekly golf articles on Fantasy Six Pack. I'll go ahead and tell you, my plays this year have not been as good as last year. If you know me, it's driving me insane. But it has been a wild PGA season, but we're still only a few months into it. So I'm hoping to turn that around. Go on ESPN Northwest Florida every Wednesday. The Inside Drive with Ryan Mulvey. Talk, sports in general, but mostly golf and DFS golf. This time of year, we'll talk football, DFS football in the fall. And then on Fantasy and Friends on Thursday night, started doing 2 new shows. The first is Fantasy Football Weekly with Jorge, Kevin Tompkins, and Britt Flynn. I don't even really know how to describe it. We're really just trying to shoot the breeze, talk about whatever's going on, not really go in with an agenda. It's not a stats or whatever. It's just basically talking about the world of fantasy football. And then Stacey Perez has brought me in on, I think, just a great show that she has going, which is just a draft show where each Thursday night she'll have, whether it be a Best Ball Mania draft, which we did last week, or a redraft. And literally she will be in a draft. And we just kind of hang out and talk while the draft goes on. Stacey's very good at this stuff. She gives you her insight. Kevin Tompkins has joined us. So is Erica. She's
Awesome.
America 08 on Twitter. Go follow her. And it's a lot of fun. Again, it's not something where we don't know what we're going to talk about. Like last week, I was talking about Monday Night Raw because Patrick Mahomes was at Monday Night Raw in Kansas City. I mean, you don't know what's going to come up, but both of them are fun hangs. And what I'm liking about the draft show is for somebody like me, I feel like it's kind of getting a lot of mocking in and understanding like what's going to happen come August. And maybe that gives me a little bit of an advantage, and it could give you one too.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it. Yeah, everyone should check into the draft show if you haven't watched it. I watched a episode of it last week, and yeah, it was a good time. Like kind of one of those you can tell it's just not super scripted. It just kind of naturally flows, and it's a good conversation. So yeah, everyone should check that out if they haven't.
We always post the draft. Like if you listen on Spotify where you can't see the draft board because we have it up there, we always list the results. That way you can see how everybody drafted and what, again, event it is, the entry fee, everything. So if you want to draft with us, you can. We've got
speaking of drafts, we just finished up a dynasty mock draft at the site over on Fantasy Six Pack.
And
so if you head on over to the site, I did a write-up on that today. I'm pretty sure I have the best team in there. Just, not being unbiased or anything. Just I think my team's awesome in there. But you guys should go read that article. It is free, and you guys should let me know what you think on who had the best team there. It's just nice that we have
literally right now. I'm glad you told me that.
We have landing spots. We can kind of start really analyzing into 2024. It's the best time of year. Yeah, you're getting pulled up here. I'm intrigued to see who you think who had the best draft in that one.
Where did you pick?
I had 12 in this one. I picked.
All right, it's a 12-team league, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, then I love picking 12.
Yeah, so I didn't mind it. Started with CD and Kyler, so that's a good start there for Superflex League.
Man, it is crazy though. Just 2 QB leagues, man. Because I told you I'd never done one until last year.
Yeah.
And that first round, you're like, wait a minute, what? You start seeing some of these QBs going off the board. You're like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And then you realize, I guess I got to start, 2 of them. So I'm interested to see if they start doing some best balls with those because, they really don't. All the best balls, at least that I've seen, are 1 QB. They'll have a lot of different variation, how many wide receivers, running backs, flex, all that stuff. But I am kind of surprised none of them have branched out into, quote unquote, the super flex best balls because that's becoming more and more of a, popular format of fantasy football.
Yeah, I agree. It's coming at some point. It just takes some time. But yeah, so check that out on the site. What else? I got a new set of dynasty ranks I'm finishing up right now. So those will be on the site for members. Just a few other small things, just kind of wrapping up draft content here. I started doing a little bit of writing for Dynasty Football Factory. Mostly so far, just been kind of doing some player scouting reports. Just put up like a Florin Roy, the Cowboys 6th-round receiver. Just got a quick little draft report up on him. Spoiler alert.
What are they doing, by the way? Can we have 1 second to ask you? What are they doing?
I feel like we are just kind of getting set up for a clean break after this year if things don't go well. We can pretty much retool around CD and Micah, and anybody else can pretty much see the door, and we have a fairly clean reset. That's my thought. I mean, I still feel like at some point they'll extend Dak, but the way it sounds right now, like we would still be paying for it, but we could pretty much clean break after next year, and then the year after that, we're right back at it. So,
would you want them to re-sign him?
It's complicated. Like, yes, if you're going to do the other moves to put talent around him, but like they haven't shown a willingness to do that. I mean, you see these teams get creative with the cap. I mean, look in our own division, Philadelphia. They always have the ability to go make move, to get space, to trade up for picks, to go trade for players. So it's just
but they're also not paying their quarterback, right? Like they're not paying nearly
this year. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Let's see how they do moving forward because that's what where I get so. I think it's such a difficult question because it's so much money that unless you have like a Mahomes and Allen, those kind of guys, if they're not like elite, it's just putting you like if your front office, to your point, is not just basically the best in the league, you're going to struggle like winning games because you're going to be so weak at so many areas.
If you're not creative and aggressive, especially, they just kind of sit back and let everybody else get paid and just drive up those numbers. So, like, I don't know. I'm not afraid of a rebuild. Like, my first Cowboys game I went to in person was the 0-4 Cowboys with Quincy Carter at quarterback. So I have lived through the hell that can come through a rebuild. So I'm not afraid of that.
I like this QB class, by the way.
I would rather lean in and try and win around Dak, but like they just – for whatever reason, they just have not really shown a willingness to do what it takes compared to the teams around them. So, like, if you're going to rebuild, I think it kind of makes sense to cut bait and do that sooner rather than later. But, I mean, if I had my way, I would keep Dak, sign him, get that extension done so that cap never drops a bit. Go get some more pieces to throw around him. But
your pyramid would be Lamb, Dak, and Mika.
Everybody else kind of plays off of those. Get Trayvon Diggs hopefully in there too, and show that. But if not, I mean, I think they reset the quarterback contract, and then you can pay up for CD, Micah, Diggs, and then you have a cheap quarterback for at least 4 or 5 years. And so I don't know. I'm not afraid of a rebuild, but I am not confident in our front office's ability to rebuild. Or
it does suck living in the middle though, right? Because I've gone through this with the Hawks and like with Trae Young, where I'm now to the point where I'm like, let's just get rid of him. Like I love Trae, but I'm tired of being 44 and 40 or 40 and 44, and it's like we've capped out here. I'd like to at least have a chance. Like at least if you're bad, you could hit the lottery with draft picks and stuff.
It's not Dak's fault. Like Dak does.
No. It's not.
For the weapons he's been dealt, he does more with less compared to a lot of quarterbacks. It's just he needs some help. Like he isn't that Mahomes, Allen, where he's the guy that's getting you over the top. Like he can get you there, but he's going to need a little bit of help around him. And I don't know, man. The O-line's getting young again. So, like, we got to hope that some of the young guys we drafted are day one starters, and that's always a risk with rookies. So, I don't know. I'm open-minded going into the year that whatever happens, and whether if we're heading to a rebuild next year, I'm ready for it, and if things go well and we're running it back with this crew and trying to win a Super Bowl, like, I'm good with it, I guess. I'm just along for the ride at this point.
I was just curious.
Yeah, so I guess, that's my official answer is I am sitting on the fence, I guess.
Like a turtle.
Yeah, exactly. But all right, guys, I appreciate everyone stopping by. Keith, again, make sure I appreciate you stopping by. Make sure everyone goes on
always.
Twitter. Go make sure you check out all the different shows that he's on every single week. And we'll be back again next Monday. I appreciate everyone stopping by.
Happy birthday, Joe Matz.
Yes, sir.